One more minute. Come and get your seats. Let's sit down, let's gather. Gosh, you even listened. It's shocking. My name's Judith Farber Weissman, and I'm here to say good morning and thank you for being here. And thank you people who are streaming. I know some had appointments and are coming in a bit late, and we're a bit late, and that's all working out fine. And the community of engagement continues. We've spent the last steering committee meeting coming up with brilliant ideas for the coming year. And we're very excited. And we've got the likes of Pat Morrison and Sheila Kuehl. And well, we're thrilled. And we will have a wonderful kickoff. I'm waiting for dates from Abigail, our executive director. And we're looking forward to having we call these Wednesdays at the Temple, they're Watts. Don't ask me how that happened 15 years ago, but it's happened, and so we have our second Wednesday of each month, Watt, and then we salt in some wonderful Sunday programs for all of us. So we are here, and I want Susan Davidson and Bob have connected so wonderfully with Bernice Gottlieb. And Susan's going to give us an intro, and thank you so much for everything you've done to make this happen today, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy, and thank you for all of you who are here, and we're so happy that you are here to hear Bernice. I'm going to get out of the way so you can see her. I don't want to block her. I brought 2 of her books. So she's an accomplished author, and her books are available, very interesting. Bernice has had an extraordinary life. She's an author, she's a humanitarian, and she has done some work in a leprosy colony and in adoption of children from different areas. She has joined us in Los Angeles. She'll tell us a little bit about her life. She initially was married to a very well-known architect and traveled all over the world with him. So I think she's one of the nicest and most interesting people I've met. She was awarded the Ellis Island Medal of Honor for her work with children in South Korea. So she is acknowledged for the work she has done all over the world. And I don't want to take any more time from you, Bernice. I think everybody will enjoy this. And I have some books, if you want to look at them. You can't have these. These are mine. Should I put this here? Okay, is this going to be, will this pick up?
No worries.
Wait. Wow, that's hard.
Yes,
For the end?
at the end, yes.
Yes, okay. So do you want to move this?
No, I have one.
Oh, you have one, okay, great.
I'm good. Well, it's a very nice introduction, and I thank you all for coming this morning. And I have special thanks for Susan and Bob Davidson, who invited me to this venerable synagogue. I had never been in it, and I am thrilled to be here, pleased and proud both. So if we look at the screen, there is a photograph, which I am very fond of Mother Teresa holding a 2-year-old little boy born without arms, found on a street in Calcutta. Through a mutual friend, she contacted me, and what an honor that was, to help find a home in America for him. Well, I did so immediately. I called one family, they said yes, and he was taken care of. A wonderful Italian family with lots of children and good food. He should be fine. And in fact, 40 years later, I saw him. He had prostheses and a son of his own who was healthy. It was a nice ending to that story. So that's all about adoption. In 1979, Vietnam was raging still. I think it was earlier, 69, excuse me. 75, the war was over. So in 69, my husband and I decided to adopt a child. We had 2 lovely sons, but we wanted a daughter to complete our family. And so we went to the local social services, and they turned us down as adoptive parents. And I said, what have we done wrong? It turned out they had never done an overseas adoption. And I said, well, I'm going forward, and what I'll do is I'll keep track of what I do, and when I come back, I'll let you use my information to start a little section for overseas adoption. And that's what they did. And before long, Westchester County, New York, where I am from actually, had no adoptions of overseas children. And so Susanna Chung Younga, my little girl, would walk in the street and people would stop me and say, Bernice, how did you do that? And before I knew it, I had a group of people, of hundreds maybe of people, 400 or 500 people who had come through my services. So the county allowed me to work with everybody because I was the one who had the experience. And so this was happening across the country. You know, with Vietnam raging, children, I asked earlier, did anyone see a video of children running across a bridge and being napalm bombed? It was shown across the country. And it started little groups like mine. And before I knew it, I had this mimeograph machine that we were turning out letters. I had 30,000 families across the United States wanting to adopt foreign children, Asian children. Vietnam was not available. The social services in Vietnam were shut off. And so what we did is explore other Asian children. And the New York Times had a magazine section about children in South Korea. And so we went in that direction, and that's how we got our little girl. So at one point, I decided to help handicapped children. I had an interest in them. And I went to the State Department, and I spoke to several people and made it known that if they were handicapped, I would be interested in finding homes for them. A Korean friend of mine, her name is Clara Han, came to me and said, Bernice, I want you to do a favor for this Catholic priest. I said, what is it? She said, he has just come back from Scandinavia where he tried to place 8 healthy children from his leprosy colony, and they would not take the children. They felt that they would be contagious and they were too frightened. So he's on his way back from Scandinavia. I told him to stop in New York and speak to you. and we had a wonderful talk. He said, leprosy. I knew nothing about leprosy. It's a foreign word as far as I was concerned. So he said, let me tell you, leprosy is the least contagious of all contagious diseases. But the children that I want to bring into the country is for a mission I have. And what is that? I said, Father Lee. He said, I want to prove that they are healthy even though their parents have the disease. And I said, and how will we do that? If you take these 8 children and bring them into the United States. He said, you know, they can't go to school with their contemporaries. They have no basic civil liberties. They are called mundungi, which means a leper's bastard. And that's really terrible, but that's how they refer to them. And he said, you can't, in that atmosphere, develop your educational skills, what you're doing with your life. So 14,000 healthy children at that time lived in colonies without their civil liberties. And I said, okay, well, first thing I've got to do is find out about leprosy. And I called the CDC, and they said, they looked in their records, there's nothing to prevent the entry of healthy children into the United States. He said, as long as they're healthy, they're just kids. Good. I said, what about the contagiousness? He said, that's another story. I can't make you a leprosy expert, but it's called Hansen's disease. That's what we refer to it as. And I said, okay. I thought to myself, I have to find out about leprosy. I called all my doctor friends. Can you tell me something? No. Can you? He said, well, I read a paragraph in the journal, the medical journal, but I don't know really. I've never treated a leprosy patient. And then one friend came down with a torn page, and he said, I saw this advertisement, and what does it say? It's from the Baptist Church. They are doing an annual program in leprosy, and it is geared to doctors, nurses, and missionaries. Are you any of these? He said to me. I said, oh, you can call me a missionary at this point. But I read the small print, excuse me. It looked difficult to get on this because they only took 45 people annually, but it was the best course in leprosy ever. So I called the Baptist Church, and I made an appointment with the person who was in charge of that program. And the minute I walked in the door, he said, I don't like what you're doing, just stop right now. I said, why? He said, you'll do more harm than good. Once you see leprosy patients, you'll be afraid of them. It's just not for you. I said, look, I'm ready to do this. And I said, there's more to this. And I told him, we want to set an example so that the 14,000 children can be free to go to school and to have their liberties. He said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Gottlieb, I'm not interested. And I walked out crushed. And when I came home, I said to my husband, I guess that's one thing I'm not going to be able to do is to help this lovely priest. Well, a few days later, I get a letter. He accepted me. Now, I don't know why he accepted me, but I was accepted, and I went to Carville, Louisiana, and took the course in leprosy. It was a 10-day intense lesson course from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening, and I really became, I have a certificate showing that I'm a leprosy paramedical worker. I even had to do a punch biopsy, which is scary, but I did it. So that was the beginning of my career. I was able to call my friend, Dr. Lee, Father Lee, and tell him, okay, I think I'm with the program. And so we started the whole thing. In adoption at that time, I would just fill out a little form, put a couple of names down, where they live and all of that, and they would come in on something called a parole visa. It's for especially for special people, little orphans. It didn't occur to me, even though I had gone to Korea and met the parents, that they have parents, they're not orphans. So they couldn't come in on parole. Well, I went into a little panic. Now what do I do? This is not something, I'm not familiar with all these immigration things. And I said, oh, what about there were several systems to come into the United States. And I said, couldn't we find a way to do it? And they said, if they're orphans, you cannot do it, period. So what do? I made promises. I promised the priest, I promised some adoptive parents who've signed up for the children, I promised the people in Korea, and I didn't know what to do. So a friend of mine, NBC News people were following my program, and a friend of mine at NBC said, you know, speak to Ralph Nader's legislative assistant. She knows a lot about what to do in cases like this. So I met with this woman, Nancy Chasen, and she said, look, Bernice, you've been working on this now for 6 months. You have to start from the beginning again. And I said, and how do I do that? She said, you have to get 1,000 signatures showing that people are interested in that community. So I got 1,000 signatures. And then I went back and I showed these signatures to my senator and my congressman. It was Senator Jake Javits. You may know his name. He was a great supporter of mine. And also Hamilton Fish Jr. Yeah. So they got together and I begged them to please put legislation in on our behalf. I have no way of getting him in. It was stuck. They did write legislation and put it in. And another 6 months passed. It just, the time kept rolling by. Well, at this point, I had to start lobbying procedure, which means you contact everyone involved in immigration and you do your piece about it. And you beg, basically, please look into this, please support my legislation. Well, they did support my legislation, but only the Congress did. The Senate absolutely refused. Oh, thank you, Thorson. That's so darling of you. Thank you, love. Cheers. My program was all over the place. I even made the front page of the New York Times. It was hard for a woman in those days to do that. I was proud of myself. Now, I knew nothing, as you know, about the disease, but I began to feel like an expert because I had answers to a lot of questions that I was asked. And, oh, in between all of this, I get a letter from Jim Jones of People's Temple thanking me for my work with children. And the following month, he killed 800 people. You know that. It was so funny to get his letter. During this period, Dr. Howard Rusk, I don't know if you know the name of the Rusk Institute, made this statement at NBC, and I find it really to the point. I'm going to read it to you. What he said is, the dividends may well be more important than the principle, and that is by demonstrating that leprosy is not an infectious, terrible, scourge type of disease. These kids can come having undergone every health regulation in the world, and they are accepted as normal children, and that is as it should be. It was a powerful statement. It said what I wanted to say. So it was at that point that I went to Korea. I had made a cursory visit, but now I meant to speak to all the parents there. I had to explain to them that what a leprosy is in terms of the outside world, and tell them that if the children come, just like a parent-teachers meeting, they will be able to have all their freedom, all their rights. And the parents said, will they be good to our children? Will they accept the fact from where they come? And she said, we want to know that they're healthy. So I decided to change a couple of laws in Korea. What I did was go to the ministry, and I said, what I want to do is give these children the ability to speak to their parents, to write to their parents, to go home when they want to. And that was a done deal. We did it. We passed that law. So I was able to feel good in my heart that they would see their children again. And believe it or not, over the years, they traveled back and forth. The children were teaching the children in St. Lazarus Village English. Excuse me. You're my helper. Thank you. Anyway, it was a perfect affair eventually. But until they came to America, no worries. That's good. Here, this is good. Okay. I'm missing things because I'm not reading my notes. Once I made the decision to put legislation through and to lobby for it, I was called to testify before the Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and International Law, who must approve of what I was attempting to do. And they did approve. That was easy. I now needed a social service agency. You know, when you go for adoption, they do a home study, if you've ever done that. And they just to be sure that you're good, adequate parenting. So I had to find a social service agency that would handle my program. I had 2 of them applied. They said they would do it, and then they backed out. They were afraid. I had to cross the United States. I went from New York to Oregon. Finding an agency, I could not get an agency. They wouldn't do it. Now, without an agency, I can't have a program, and I can't have the children come in. But when I got home, the best agency that there is for me was Spence Chapin in New York. And they said, can we do the program? They wanted to do it so they could have a program of their own. So that was a really good step. Now let's see what else I missed here. Got a few notes. What's on the screen?
Spence Chapin.
Oh, there it is.
The number, the pages.
Remember with
So
Spence.
this is
Here it is.
3. Yeah, okay. Wins and
I'm good.
setbacks. Okay, I want to just see. Okay, and then here's 4.
Okay.
And here, this is 2, so you finished this one. and
Thank
this
you.
5. Okay?
More organized than I am, for sure.
No, I'm not. You're wonderful.
No.
Yeah.
just said that after Spence Chapin accepted, I said, this is not like any adoption I expected. I certainly didn't expect to go to Washington every week. I went 42 times to Washington to lobby. And I had 3 children at home and a husband also. Anyway, at this point, suddenly we get a call that they may accept the parole. We were ecstatic and jumping up in joy. I called all the parents here and in Korea. They may accept it, and it looked very good. Just when everything is going in a positive direction, I receive a shocking call. Criminal charges have been filed against me, and the paroles therefore have been denied. Criminal charges. I am accused of stealing the 8 children and selling them in the United States. Congressman Fisher's legislative aide calls me and is furious. He believes the accusation, though ridiculous, will spoil my reputation, and says they ought to change the laws so people like you don't bring garbage into this country. I need an attorney. I have to have an attorney to handle this. I found a terrific attorney, and he said, the first thing you've got to do is invoke the Freedom of Information Act. And that took me a couple of weeks, but I found out who had made the accusation. It's this major organization called World Vision. They have, they're very big operation. They have people in 20 or 30 countries of leprosy, and they know everything about the disease, and they're very famous, they're very well funded. Why are they against my little program? Turns out I was on their turf. They didn't like it, and they were ready to smash it, and they did. The paroles were denied because of them. My little program. I had become a thorn in the side of anyone involved with immigration, from the people in the New York section of the Immigration and Naturalization Service to all the departments in Washington, State, Justice, and HEW, as well as the Attorney General, the Commissioner of Immigration, and the counsel to the President in the White House. I was relentless. Now I became a maniac. I badgered, cajoled, made promises, anything that might move the big bureaucracy into action. I was actually filled with a deep sense of responsibility for what I had started. I knew that if I failed, the leprosy cause in South Korea would suffer a major setback, and 14,000 healthy children would never have a chance for a better life. I learned from an anonymous call, always anonymous, they don't want to tell you, that Senator James Eastland of Mississippi was holding up my bills. The reason for it was he was bartering with Congress. He wanted to bring in a large number of Mexican transient workers to harvest his farmland. And so he was holding back mine until he got his bill passed. I had no idea how Washington worked. So what do? Right now, I'm at my wit's end. I feel accused. I feel sorry for myself. Why did I start this? And I called one of the adoptive parents who's going to be adopting one of the children. Her name was Arlene. I called her in Washington, and I said, what I want you to do is buy a huge Easter lily plant. It was Easter time. Buy a huge plant, send it to Senator Eastland, and tell him, surrounded by despair and helplessness, we pray that, really corny, we pray that the spirit of Easter will fill your heart with mercy and compassion, and through your help, our years of waiting to join our parents in America will finally come to an end. Of course, it was no response to it. What's my next step? Well, if I can't see and talk to Eastland, I'll call his aide. And I contacted his aide, whose name was Courtney Pace. Oh my, Courtney Pace. I made an appointment at 1:30 the following day, and I was determined to get him to move a little. I'm in his office, and it's now 2:30. It's now 2:45. So I go over to his secretary, and I said, is Mr. Pace going to be finished with whatever he's doing, or shall I make another appointment? She said, oh, no, he'll be all right. One moment, don't go away. And she opens his door, and I get a glimpse of this elderly man. He must have been close to 90. His hair was up here. There was an indentation on his pillow. He'd been having a little nappy. So I put my hand out. He stood up and fixed his hair. I put my hand out, and he said, so you're the lady bringing the lepers here? I said, no, sir, they're not lepers. They're healthy children. Their parents are sick. They're not lepers. Their parents are ill. So he sat me down on a chair in front of his desk. He put his hands behind his back and started walking around me. And he said, you know, I met a lady just like you, a nice Jewish lady. And she was asking to become a citizen of the United States. The problem was she was a prostitute. I was wondering, what has this got to do with me? And he kept walking around and walking around. And he said, well, she had a mother she had to support. And they were from Europe. And, you know, I felt really sorry for her. And I said to myself, she's going to be a good citizen. She's going to work hard. And he said, so I made her an American citizen. I allowed it to go through. And every Christmas, she sends me a lovely gift. And I'm shown out of the office at that point. I'm finished. They don't give me any more time with him. And I kept wondering, did I hear something that I was supposed to hear? Was there something in this conversation that was useful to me? Not really. Not really. So now I'm still lobbying. I'm going every week to Washington. But I'm a little bit tired. And I asked one of the adoptive parents, Betty Elliott, to accompany me. We'll do the lobbying together, you know. And so she came. And when we got to one of the best supporters, I had Senator Fung of Hawaii. He was supporting my program. When we got to his office, his aide started to talk to us. And she said, Bernice, I think you left one person out of your search. I said, what do you mean? She said, have you spoken to Edward Lochran? I said, I don't even know the name. She said, he's a powerful person in Washington. He's counsel to the judiciary. He is a major player in immigration. Okay, thank you so much. He's a major player in immigration. And I had not even heard the name. I couldn't believe I had left someone out. It didn't seem possible. So I look up his extension, and I find his office. I call his office because they told me sorry, I'm going back a bit. The aide told me it's impossible to get an appointment with him. He's so powerful. When people call him, they ask what hemisphere they're calling from. My God. And another thing she said, I have some advice for you. If you should get in to see him, be sure to cry. I was a little bit indignant. And I said to Betty Elliott, who cries easily, Betty, I'll never talk to you again if you go in that office and cry. Don't you dare cry, Betty. So we call, and someone answers. A secretary answers. Everybody had left. That was 5:30. In Washington, 5 o'clock, everything was over. At any rate, she answers the phone, and I ask for an appointment with Mr. Loughran tomorrow. She said, what time? I said, 1:30. She said, fine. See you at 1:30 tomorrow. Well, we rented a hotel room. We planned what we were going to say. This is a powerful man. I felt this was the last step. If this didn't work, nothing would. Following day, we appear exactly at 1:30. And the secretary looks at us strangely. She said, may I help you? I said, yes, we have an appointment with Mr. Loughran. She said, you're not down for an appointment. There's nothing in the book. I said, well, I called yesterday, and I was told that I could have this appointment. And then I started getting mad. I felt put upon. I said, raised my voice. I had to go to a hotel last night and pay for that. We're not millionaires, you know, and I have to see him. It's really urgent. And I was just being obnoxious. And she said, we heard a voice, Gloria, come in here. And so he called his secretary in. When she emerged, she said, you can see him for 5 minutes. He has to go down at 2 o'clock to the judiciary. Well, that was a break. And we got into his office, and just like Courtney Pace, he said, you're the woman who materializes through locked doors. You're driving everybody crazy in immigration. He said, what? And this was a tall, handsome man, oh my God, with bushy eyebrows and a voice like, well, a very funny voice. And he said, what do you hope to accomplish? What, with all the work you're doing, with all the wallowing around in Washington, what do you hope to accomplish? Well, I said, I think small, sir. I like to help one child at a time. And he said, but that's against all we've ever been taught. I said, that may be so, but if you help one person at a time, the Bible says you've helped all humanity. And he takes his briefcase and starts to leave. Doesn't give me any more chance to talk. He's going out the door, and I'm starting to cry. Tears are flowing down my face like crazy. And I keep my normal speaking voice. I said, thank you so much, Mr. Loughran. I'm so glad you could see us. Then he turns around again. Okay, look, come back in 2 hours. I will see you then, and I'll help you make this damn thing work. And he did. He did. I went back in 2 hours, and it still took 4 more months. But I was in Washington all the time, having dinner with Mr. Loughran in the Senate dining room. So we became friendly, and he got my children here. And I thought, well, that's the end. I can go home and relax and be with that family that misses me so much. That wasn't the case. The government of India liked the fact that I was able to make that program work. And they said, could you come right away, and I have it all set up for you, if you will, to look at our leprosy colonies and see what you can do for our children. So I was there for a couple of months and made my report, but it was an entirely different story than Korea. So I thought, well, now I'm going to rest. And then the man who screamed at me from the Baptist church offered me a grant to represent all the leprosy organizations to the UN as an NGO, non-governmental organization. And I accepted that. The good thing about it was for the Year of the Child, 1979. And through my work with a committee on stigma, we were able to examine 1 million children worldwide for leprosy. And we found 1 in 13 to have the disease. So I was very proud and pleased with my work there. Anyway, I continue to be called Leprosy Lady. And that's, I think, what I am. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Are you on? Yeah. Wow, wow, fabulous, wonderful. I mean, the last words you said, I know there's comments and questions, but stigma, because don't we deal with stigma? Don't we deal with stigma by virtue of our age? That's it.
Age from 1 to 13.
But our age, we're more than that. We are way up there, and in our way, in our fashion, what we do at the COE is make our statements and challenge our minds and keep ourselves vital. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why we have this program that we encourage all ages to become a part of. And so now, if there's comments, questions, I want, please, let's do that. And you're up for answering, responding. Okay, Brenda and then Linda.
Okay.
So Bernice, I don't know the background of the leprosy colonies now. Are there many, and what's going on with the children of these people?
Well, the children in Korea all went to public school after that. It was completely opened up, and they couldn't go back. There was so much publicity around the world that they had to do it. Oh, phone. This is it. The children all were free from that point on. And I didn't mention, I was a little careless, the children that I brought in, the first 8 children, were age 1 to 13. It's a hard age to place in adoption.
I greatly admire your work. I think it's fabulous. But I must say, I'm very attracted to your memory as well. It was incredible that you were able to repeat your conversations. I think that's wonderful. I wondered, though, when I saw that headline on the paper about 8 lepers coming to the United States to be adopted.
That was on the foreign paper. We don't say leper.
So that's
don't
what
say
I was wondering. The term is so negative. How were they then? Was it ever amended so that they were not called children of lepers or whatever?
I'm not quite sure of the question, but here in this country, They were not called any names, of course. And they were free. They were like any other kid, you know, living here with families. Leprosy is the least contagious of all contagious diseases. And it is now totally curable, isn't it, Dr. Davidson?
Yeah, actually, there's another member here who has treated leprosy. So where's Bob? Oh, there he is. You want to answer that?
Oh, here, Bob. Here.
Well, it's minimally contagious. And we have rifampin and dapsone and other drugs that work relatively quickly. They take it for 6 months, I think, which cures the disease. So it's not near as worrisome as it was in past years. When we took care of them, I took care of them from 72 to 74, and I was very intimidated at the time, and it was through the Public Health Service, and we got hazardous duty pay for taking care of the patients, though no one was ever hurt or anything, but I was always intimidated and would clean my office after I would see them. But the odds of someone getting it are minimal. Spouses rarely catch leprosy, very minimally contagious.
It's actually related closely to tuberculosis, the same family bacteria.
I was in Indonesia with my daughter traveling in the late 90s, and we visited a colony and talked with people. She's a medical anthropologist, and she was doing her dissertation at the time. And what was interesting to me culturally is that they were all free to go into the world, out and leave the colony, but of choice, they were a community, and they preferred to be there, and they did have family, children, and that was home, and that was, you know, isn't that interesting? I mean, I found that very interesting.
I had a question about what happened when you were contacted by the people in India, because I always associated leprosy colonies with India for whatever reason. I never knew that there were until I had your book about Korea. But whatever happened with those children? You said that didn't work.
The difference between Korea and India is that in Korea, they are resettlement villages, which means if you develop disease, you are taken out of your own community and put into a resettlement village. Mm-hmm. In India, that doesn't exist. They make their own villages because of their illness. And the thing is, the Indians are very difficult. But if you pay for school clothes and books, they can go to school. There's no problem with that. There's no stigma. I mean, the thing is, Indian people may be diagnosed, and the doctor may say, you have to take these pills because it will help you. They give it to their oxen. They do things like that, which are very frustrating. So it was a very different ambiance there, very different. However, I started a program where people, friends of ours, would send $25 a month for a long time to pay for various villages.
Yeah, wonderful, Bernice. You're just such an amazing woman. I was wondering if your Jewishness kind of came into this in terms of how you were received in all your different liaisons. And I sort of am free associating to like Barbara Streisand in some of her movies where when you said there's this woman who's, you know, won't take no for an answer. But and did it work in your favor? Did it work against you? Or did you not kind of perceive it to be part of the equation? Yes, you're being a Jewish. Pro-
I believe I was the only Jewish woman, given a grant by the Baptist Church. And they introduced me once to a huge group of Baptist ministers. And they said, "We're going to make a Baptist out of her yet." I said, "That would be very hard to do." So it impacted on everything I did. So I always heard Jewish, you know, NGO representing 140 or 150 organizations, Jewish. She's Jewish. It was already part of the sentence. I was an anomaly in a way. They never had a Jewish person working anywhere in leprosy where I was. You may have seen some, Bob. Never did I meet another Jewish person. So it's not a favorite disease of Jews.
Thank you. You are inspiring. And my question is, because it appears you didn't bifurcate, you didn't live with right, wrong, these people who prevented you, I don't think you demonized them. How could you help us today in the United States reduce our enmity based on fear and open up to the other, to listen, to become vulnerable? Can you help us?
It's hard for me to hear you.
Bernice.
Do you have a mic?
Yeah, Bernice.
It's hard for me to hear you. I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear the question. Will you tell me?
I could hear you fine. Oh, dear.
Oh,
She's going to
translate.
Yeah,
Dodie wants.
I know.
That's the eternal question. How can we be more tolerant? How can we be... I just think we plod ahead. You know, Jews don't often get credit for things they do. And my friend in Korea, Father Lee, got the highest award the country had to offer for doing this, the Soma Award. If you know what that is, it's a very important award. So he was given his award. My reward was to see everything work and to let me go home to my family and not do all of these things. I left the UN after 4 or 5 years, and I was sorry to do so. But during the Year of the Child, I was so effective, it was wonderful. I look back on those days. You just have to grasp the people. You have to get them to you. And it's so easy to do when you try. All different kinds of people. It was a real great experience for me and for my life.
Hi. I've loved hearing your story and all the variations of finally getting to what you wanted and not giving up. I had an experience in the mid-'60s. I was living in Asia, and my husband was a CBS News correspondent. I had just arrived in Calcutta to meet him, and Calcutta itself astounded me. I wished I'd had eyes all around my head because everywhere there was so much to see. And at one point during the next day or that day, someone approached us who had been in America to study and recognized the CBS symbol on the cameras and so forth, and said that he would take us to a leprosarium. And it was right here in this area. And I don't know if it frightened me or fascinated me, I think both. And we did go. And what I found, to my fascination to this day, was there was a series of huts and different impoverished people living in this larger village. And the leprosy people were in one of them, not separated from other huts, but in the same area. And I'm still astounded, but when you say it's the least infectious, I didn't know whether I was going to see people who already had extremities that were wearing in. I had no idea, but it has stayed with me all these many 60 years later. That experience was unbelievable.
Very, very interesting. What?
We do have a video of Bernice in in the leprosy colony. Would you guys like to see that?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Kudos to my helper, Natalia.
These children are social outcasts, shunned and feared in their country, not for what they are, but for where they are, a leprosy village located on a remote mountainside in South Korea. It's called St. Lazarus. It is one of many such segregated villages in Korea where leprosy victims and their families are forced to go. The children here do not have the disease. They may never have it, but they must live their lives here as their children and their children's children must. They will not be able to work nor marry outside of the colony. They are victims of ancient ignorance. Leprosy is the least contagious of all contagious diseases. In its early stages, it is easily treated. But when symptoms first appear, the old fears cause victims to hide or to be hidden. Then leprosy becomes that much more difficult to treat, and without treatment, the disease grows. This has been the tragic pattern for centuries in villages like St. Lazarus. Now that may be changing.
Is that it?
Is that it?
It's a much longer video, but this is the part that we have.
Oh, okay, okay.
Thank you.
This was from the priest? This was the village?
Who made the video?
Who made the video? The priest that you were?
NBC made this video, so this was part of the coverage for Bernice's program.
I see, okay. This, you know, I want to thank you so much, Bernice, because I think this was enlightening. Well, for me, it was certainly enlightening, and I hope the other people here felt the same way. And you are somebody to be so admired. I cannot tell you, I admired you before, but even more so now. You are just amazing, and a model for those of us who are getting up there in age and what we can do and what we still can do. I happen to know that Bernice is still very involved in what's going on in the world, because we discuss politics when we talk, and there's a lot to discuss these days. So thank you so very much for giving us your time and being here with us. You are fabulous.
Do you know, is your book, is this particular book still available? Can it be purchased?
Well, I've written about 4 or 5.
No, but this particular one about the,
This particular one tells this story.
right. And is it available?
A love story. You can get it if you wish to on Amazon.
Of course.
Of course.
I may be a bit prejudiced, but I mean, can you imagine if we had more people like Bernice in this world, what we could accomplish?
Well,
I mean, the perseverance, the drive, you know, the integrity, just all the things that she's told us is inspiring. It makes the rest of us feel, I think, speaking for myself, you know, that how much more we could accomplish if we set out to do the kind of things that she did. Amazing.
I think it is about taking that next step and not being deterred. That's my takeaway from today. And I don't think it matters what age we are when we see a need to move forward and to do what's needed, and that you are a shining example of that. And I applaud you.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's you're remarkable, and lucky you, and lucky you to tell your story and retell it in places like this to people like us. And I hope you've done this also at Avoset, and they've heard your story. Yes? Wonderful.
Thank you.
She lives at
What now?
which is now called Avoset. And I'm glad it's a very stimulating bunch, and they
That's part of Jewish Home, right?